Good evening, everyone. My name's Andre LaRue. I'm the chairman of the Medford Community Development Board. This is October 14th, 2020. I call the Medford Community Development Board meeting open. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this hearing of the Medford Community Development Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the City of Medford website at www.medfordma.org. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen or watch the meeting may do so by accessing the meeting link contained herein. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the City of Medford or Medford Community Media website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Due to streaming conflicts with other city meetings, this meeting will not be streaming live, but members of the public may access the proceedings in real time via Zoom, and a recording of the full meeting will be posted on the Medford Community Media website after the meeting. Just a reminder, to participate during the meeting, questions and comments may be emailed to ocd@medford-ma.gov or submitted via phone to 781-393-2480. That's 781-393-2480. All votes will be roll call votes. And please, just a reminder, if you do speak, to introduce yourself and with your name and address.
And Andre, Jackie is on her way. She is having some technical difficulties.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, let's tackle the first item on the agenda, which is approval of minutes for the meeting of August 20th, 2020 and September 16th, 2020. Let's first minutes for August 20th. Any comments, questions, corrections by the board members? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Andre, this is Dave. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from our August meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second? See Clace. Roll call vote. Deanna Peabody.
Yes.
Katie McHugh.
I was not present at the meeting.
Okay, so abstain.
Yes, please.
Okay. Christy Dowd.
Yes.
Claes Andreasen. Is that a yes? It is. David Blumberg.
Yes.
And Jackie, I see you've joined us. We were just doing a roll call vote on the minutes for the August 20th meeting. Would you like to vote yay, nay, or abstain?
Yes, I vote yay. I did preview materials prior to. I can't figure out my laptop right now, and I'm sorry.
That's okay, Jackie. All right, thank you. The minutes for September 16th, 2020 meeting. Any comments, questions, or corrections? Seeing none, is there a motion on the floor to approve?
Andre, this is Dave. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes for our September 16th, 2020 meeting.
Great. Thank you, David. Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Katie McHugh.
Thank you, Katie. All right, roll call vote. Deanna Peabody.
Yes.
Katie McHugh.
Yes.
Christy Dowd.
Yes.
Claes Andreasen.
Yes.
David Blumberg.
Yes.
And Jackie Furtado.
Yes.
Right. Oh, and I'm a yes as well on both of those minutes, by the way. Thank you. Those are unanimously approved. The next item on the agenda is a request for extension of time for the Macklin Road subdivision. I'd like to invite the proponents, John Baldino and Michael Collins, to give a summary of where the project stands and explain the extension, please.
Yes, hi, this is Michael Collins. I'm the general contractor who was hired by John and Dave Kowalczyk, the owners of Balchek Properties, to build out the subdivision, the 3 houses and the road. And currently we have lot 2, 100% completed, just waiting on our certificate of occupancy, which we hope to be issued tomorrow. Lot 3, number 40 Macklin, should be done within two to 3 weeks. Another certificate of occupancy and a sale. And lot 1 is about 50% complete. It's framed and roofed. The windows and doors are going in tomorrow, and that should be completed by the end of January. Relative to the subdivision improvements, we have installed some of the roadway improvements, but realistically, most of them will occur in the spring after the winter season. And we appreciate this meeting, and relative to our request for an extension, you had graciously given us till October 9th to complete the subdivision. We have been hit by the COVID issue relative to some of our labor delays and certainly our material delays. So but in general, we've done pretty well and been pretty expeditious on our building. And so we'd appreciate the extension through the end of June of next year.
Thank you. Mr. Baldino, do you want to add anything or?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say, I think Annie was saying that we should get for the bond extension to that time as well. Our bond runs out to the end of January. We talked to the lady at USI, Gail, and she said that they won't do 6 months, so we'll have to extend it for 1 year when that time comes. It runs out in January. So we will definitely do that. However, we would like to try to get a reduction on the cost of the bond because we do have a lot more done on the road since the last time we did it. So we're putting that together. Mike's going to help me put that together for you guys to go over and look at and see what you can come up with for reduction for us.
Great. Now that estimate of work that's been completed needs to be approved by the city, reviewed and approved by the city engineer. So if you could work with him and then at our next meeting, we'd be in, I think, a position to approve, a request based on the engineer's evaluation of that. If that's
we have plenty. January, the end of January is when it runs out, so we have 3 or 4 months right now to get that figured out on the reduction. There was one more thing I was going to say is about who would we set up a meeting? This is not for this meeting, but who would we go with the engineer also, the city engineer, as far as the curbing and sidewalks? There's we were trying to talk. We want to go over that with him again before. There might be some reduced curbing that we were thinking of. So is that somebody we talked to him?
Yeah, Annie, that would be the person I would go to. Is this?
Yeah, would that be a change to the subdivision plans, you mean?
Well, that's what I'm.
Yeah, it could be. It's just there's some areas out after we have this road in and stuff now looking at it, kind of common sense looking at it. It just looks like we could eliminate some areas. But of course, that would have to be approved by, you'd have to look at it with us.
Yeah, and that would have to be a request to the board who would be able to approve that type of a change. But I believe the board would likely want a recommendation from the city engineer on that as well.
Okay.
Right. So on both of those issues, we could come back at the following meeting and have his recommendations and evaluations. That would be good. So yeah, definitely follow up with him as soon as you can on both of those.
And you can actually coordinate through me in the Office of Community Development, and I can refer to Tim.
Right.
That's all I have really on this.
Okay, great. So for right now, the issue before the board for consideration is extension of the permit, so the subdivision permit. And would there be any questions or comments or discussion from the board members on that? Yes, Kless.
Can you just describe a little bit more the level of completion that has happened on the roadway?
Yeah, we have, well, we have the binder down. All the utilities are in. So basically we have the top coat to do. We have curbing and sidewalks. I think we have to raise a couple of manhole covers. It's very minimal that we have left to do over there.
And remind
And
me, it's concrete curbing?
I think that's what was on the plan. Yeah, and we were just wondering too if asphalt could be done over there.
Curbing?
Oh, no, not for curb. I'm thinking sidewalks. I'm sorry. Yeah, curbing was, yeah.
Okay.
So this is just for the extension, though. We'll have to get into those issues, I think, at the next meeting.
And
Especially
I'll just
after having some
clarify
feedback
that,
from Tim.
I'll clarify that now that the road has been built to binder, it is the preference of the engineering division that the top coat wait until after the houses are complete for that to be installed. So that's in compliance with their recommendation on that.
I don't know where this stands, but I do have a recommendation from engineering as well on the sidewalk material.
Yeah, absolutely.
Has the interface with the adjacent property, I know they had, it's a place that services some handicapped folks. Has that all been resolved and squared away? And is that?
Well, no, it really hasn't. No, in fact, I talked to Gail Ailes over there. She's been very nice. They've been great with us. They're just a little bit worried about how this curbing is going to come into effect. It's going to affect their access in and out of there. So that's one of the things I just wanted to be able to bring an engineer over there or somebody that specializes in that, and kind of have them there too at the same time and have an explanation of what we can do over there to satisfy them and also satisfy the town too. So
my recommendation was that when you bring whatever scope of work you want to do in that, or altered, changed scope of work, when you bring it to us,
Yep.
just make sure that it's abundantly clear what you're trying to do, whether it's a 3D drawing or something, so that we can really understand it rather than just trying to read it.
I'll have our engineer do that up with us too. So I'll get him involved with that. Yep. I will say though, the neighbors have been great. It didn't start out that way, but they've come to realize that it is what it is. And they've been super over there. So it's been smooth sailing.
Good. Other questions or comments from board members? Is there a motion on the floor to extend the Macklin Road subdivision permit and what's the length of time? Is it
June
30th.
June 30th? Okay. So June 30th, 2021.
So moved. This is Jackie Furtado.
Thank you, Jackie.
And I'll just clarify, that'll be the timeline for completion.
And that includes all the public right-of-way work.
Yes.
All right. Is there a second to the motion on the floor?
Yeah, I'll second.
Thank you, Deanna. We will go to a roll call vote. Yes in favor, no against, and abstain. Deanna Peabody,
Yes.
Katie McHugh,
Yes.
Christy Dowd,
Yes.
Kless Andreasen,
Yes.
David Blumberg,
Yes.
and Jackie Furtado.
Yes.
I'm also a yes, so that the permit extension has been approved. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming in today, and I think we'll probably see you next month.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Right. So the next.
I don't know how to leave the meeting. How do I leave the meeting? Oh, I see it.
Annie, can you help out with that? You
Yeah.
got it? Okay. Bye-bye now. Right. So the main item on the agenda that we had for tonight, since we were trying to keep this meeting to an hour, which would be a nice, refreshing change for everyone, is a discussion of the Medford zoning review that the city council is undergoing, and then also talk a little bit about our board rules, policies, and regulations. So it's a bit of an open-ended discussion. Can I just see how many of you were able to listen to the city council meeting before this? 1, 2, 3. So
Half of it.
about half. All right. Okay. I was able to participate. So I thought it was a very good presentation. I think what they covered, for those who didn't hear, were really the roles and responsibilities of the boards, and also, I guess, the way Mark Bobrowski, who is the zoning consultant, he calls it like everybody's job description. He also went over the non-conforming lots and structures and how that's dealt with in the preamble to the zoning ordinance. So I'm really happy, actually. My impression was that I think that this language, if it's approved, will be a lot more clear than what we currently have, and I think will be really helpful for everyone. So one item that I'd like to raise, I guess, in terms of structuring our discussion, is raise the issue of whether we should, as a board, provide some feedback to the zoning consultant and or the city council about what the work that's been done so far, whether we have any comments or opinion about the roles and responsibilities for our board that have been laid out. And I think it might be good for us just to put a short letter together to that effect, and also raise any questions we might have for the zoning consultant or for the city council. Secondly, I know that we want to talk about design guidelines. And then thirdly, we have some very old procedures. We don't even really look at them. I think I had to ask Annie myself whether we had them, and she said that they're very old. So we haven't really used these as a board. They date from the 70s, I think. So we should probably put some board rules and regulations together for the Community Development Board. We are the ones with sole responsibility and authority to do so. I know the City Council was asking whether they can kind of impose some rules and regulations on the boards, but the consultant said he really didn't think that was appropriate at all, and legally questionable. So that's another area where we could figure out like what we want to be, how we want to be operating as a board, and codify that. So that's a lot. We don't have to get into all of it, but really want to give us a chance for the first time as a board to have a kind of an open-ended discussion about these matters. So let's start with the zoning consultant and what we've heard. And for those of you who participated, was there anything that concerned you or that you liked? What was your impression?
I'll start.
Yeah, Christine.
I also liked the piece about roles and responsibilities. I feel like having something really clear for board members, but like more importantly for the public and people who engage with all the boards. It's so municipal government is so complicated. I think like the easier we can make that part, the better. So I thought that was a helpful piece.
Yeah, and I'll point out that the concerns that the counselors seem to raise about the way boards operate, I don't think apply to us, because there was concerns about, you know, meetings in the afternoon, or, you know, not inadequate, you know, community engagement or participation. I think like we've been pretty good on all of those things. We've gone as long as it needs to.
Agreed.
Yeah.
We've gone to the next day. So, like, we've done our job. We weren't
I'll
being
feel good
scolded.
about that. Yeah.
There was some question on the city council agenda, I didn't watch it, about was open meeting law violated if a public meeting ran into the next day, because then it was no longer posted for the right date. I didn't watch that section. I'd be curious to see whether they were discussing one of our meetings or something else. But
I don't know. We only went into about 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes, I think.
I also thought it was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Not the meeting, the question.
Right.
yeah.
It's funny that that question came up, though, because I have no legal background at all, but I do know that if any time a meeting is legally represented and advertised, no matter what time it ends, it doesn't matter what time it ends, it matters what time it starts. So I'm guessing the legality behind that does not exist.
Right.
That's just my assumption in dealing with so many different things at the state level.
Yeah.
And sorry, I didn't mean to distract. I'm going to have to apologize. I have been in the office since before 8 continuously, so I'm a little bit fried. Annie, with regards to the rules and regulations, so it's very easy for me to refer back to where you have on our shared drive the reference resources. I don't know how easy it is for people, the rest of the commission, to refer back to that location on the shared drive. But is there something other than the rules and regulations of the subdivision of land that you're referring to?
So there are a couple things. The rules and regulations of the subdivision of land that you're looking at, the last few pages of that have rules of the Medford Community Development Board governing organization and procedure.
Thank you.
That starts on page 34. And then there are also rules and regulations in relation to the site plan review, the board acting as the site plan review granting authority. And that's what I had circulated to everyone to have a discussion about that. But there are some other ones. The subdivision ones are much older. They're from the 70s. And so I can share this if you'd like, share my screen if you want to look at them, or I could distribute them after the fact and we could touch base at a later meeting.
I'm most
Alicia.
sure everybody had access to them if they wanted to review them as well. And for those of you who weren't at the meeting, they asked to see our rules and regulations and ZBAs.
Right.
And I actually took an opportunity to tell them that ours were very old, that this board had been considering and discussing revising them, but that our last several meetings had run over 4 hours. And so we just hadn't gotten to it yet, but that we were happy to share them as they stood. So I just wanted you guys to know that.
Right.
I thought that was kind of fair. And it also helped us sort of like, we're not having meetings that are too short.
Yeah. Well, Annie, I know I have paper copies, like older paper copies of that, but is that something that people can access through the shared drive?
Yes, if you are able to access the full folder of CD Board, Medford CD Board, there's a folder called Reference Resources, and it's in there. I know that sometimes if you're not linking it to your computer, it can be hard to get back to that main folder.
Yeah, I find whenever, like, I just did it right now. Yeah, if you could send it, like when I go in there and I just I click on Medford CD Board, the full thing, it only shows the meeting materials, the current meeting materials. I don't know why I can never get into the full folder. I don't know if that's just me or if others have that same issue.
It'd be helpful to know, I mean, if it's something that doesn't work consistently for everybody, then it's easier, I think, I don't know, we can troubleshoot stuff with our IT stuff too, if that's helpful. the whole SharePoint using this has been new since March for the city, really. So I think some of us are still figuring out how to work it best.
Yeah, I was just able to get into it with your link, Annie, that you sent. So for whatever reason, it seems like I need the exact link to make it work. Well, I don't think we need to really go over the old rules and regulations. So we can take a look at it at your leisure if you want to, but I think we should really think about what we want our procedures to be and really just codify like what we're doing, which I think for the most part is working.
And I can also pull, the attorney during that meeting mentioned a couple of examples of neighboring communities who he thought had especially good rules and regulations. So I could pull those and distribute to you all.
Yeah, I got the Lexington one, which is the one he referenced that he said he did. So I think that's...
I think he mentioned Winchester at one point. Maybe he was mixing the two, but he was also going to send those along.
So the Lexington ones are basically, it's titled Planning Board Procedural Rules, and it's 5 pages, and it just goes over, let's see, you know, board member authority, membership, what happens when there's a vacancy, what about an associate member, roles and responsibilities, quorum, remote participation, who can speak on behalf of the board, officers, special study committees, board appointments, liaisons, planning staff roles, and meetings. So it's not that much. Like there's only, the last page is the one that just deals with meetings. So it's really just 1 page, and it's very, you know, it just kind of talks about when is the meeting, like, you know, typically, and it even says typically held on the first and third Wednesdays of each month in the town office building at 7 p.m. whenever possible. So it's not meant to like write everything in stone, but offer some guidance and flexibility. Anyways, we can circulate those and look at them. And
So
maybe
I had a question.
Yeah.
Was he saying that Haverhill didn't have a board at all?
that's what I got from that. Yeah, it seemed like Haverhill just has, instead of a planning board, they have what's called a development board composed of department heads, city department heads. They have a very strong mayor system, and that mayor's been there for like, I don't know, decades. So.
And that may have just been for site plan review, because I believe a planning board would still need to do subdivisions and things like that.
Because he seemed to say that they were doing a very good job with their downtown and using them as a good example. So I don't know. That's what I got from his discussion. That part.
Yeah. I think. Without getting into it much, I think it's a very strong mayor system, very top-down executive. I'm not sure it's the same kind of model we have here in Medford, and it's a little bit more distributed, the authority here.
Not only that, I don't know the decision, but Haverhill does have a legislative body, actually, that acts as a planning board, and they're actually considered a planning board now. So I'm not sure. It's definitely a planning commission, because all Massachusetts cities and towns has to have planning commissions, and their idea of a planning commission, I think, just got changed to a planning board. But you might want to just, I don't know the conversation, and I have not had a chance to look into this more, but Haverhill, and you're right, the mayor does have a strong presence there, top-down leadership, but they do have a planning board. They cannot not have one.
Yeah, but he also said, I think he was, Mark Bobrowski, who's a recognized zoning expert in Massachusetts law, is, he was very supportive and encouraging of a planning board having the roles and responsibilities that are laid out here, and thought that as long as, we're willing to do the work, then that's a good thing. So I have a question. I don't know if Annie or you can help out with this, but just or maybe even David, I don't know. So a lot of our time is spent on site plan review, and he was, he was proposing that we, the city not call basically special permit with site plan approval, or whatever we call it, because it's really two different things. So I guess the question is, there's a set of criteria that triggers site plan review for certain projects. And is the way it happens in Medford, is that the right process, right? Generally, they go to the ZBA and then they kick it to us, and then it goes back to them for the variances, right? Annie, how exactly is the process supposed to look?
I don't think so. They don't hear it first.
Yeah, it wouldn't go to them first, but we would be, if it requires variances, we make a recommendation
So
to
we just
the
go,
ZBA.
it just comes to us first before the ZBA sees it. Is that right?
Yep. They're the same sort of time frame, like they could be submitted at the same time, and it could be under review by both boards, but the ZBA is supposed to wait for a recommendation from the CD board on that for the site plan review.
That's one of the things that has been questioned a little. And I know that this is something that our city engineer might have some advice on, or what he's seen elsewhere, is that there's both the need for variances in some of these cases and special permit. And in a number of these cases, one or the other of those has really been in question as to whether they were going to issue. And so whether or not we should have an applicant go all the way through site plan review until we know if they're going to get stuff like that, right? Like a setback variance, they might not get, and it might kill a project. But the one that was really project killing was the use variances. And so like the project that we spent a lot of time with, the one that was, I apologize, I always forget the street names, but the gas station and the car wash turning into a apartment building this summer, they were denied by the ZBA a use variance. And therefore, and that just kills the project. That's not, you can't redesign that, right? If you redesign it, it has to come back to us for site plan because it's a completely different project. So whether a project like that should have gone through all this work, but the way our processes are lined up, they didn't have a choice. They had to go with us first before they could be heard. And I think they even asked about severing that with the potential of getting the use variance first, then going in front of us for site plan, and then getting the variances. Because the variances, I don't want to say are negotiable, but right, if they're saying you have to have 12 feet instead of 8 feet or whatever, that's a simple change, right? Relatively speaking, relatively. And I didn't realize this, perhaps I'm not as caught up as I should be, but that project has appealed and is in land court now. So I've asked Dennis to please keep us apprised of what happens with that, because they appealed the zoning board decision of denying that.
Yeah, actually, that was news to me. I hadn't realized that. So if that happens in the future, could you just let us know?
I will tell you, I found out tonight when they said that on the meeting. I was messaging Dennis and getting more information. I mean, really, all he said is they've appealed. But I've asked him to keep me looped in on that. So one of the things that won't happen so are you guys all up to speed, up to date on the whole use variance thing? There's a big debate. Are they allowed, not allowed in Medford, right? So there are two places in our zoning code, so according to state law, you may issue use variances, your zoning board may, if your local ordinances explicitly allows use variances. If your local law is silent on it, then you may not issue use variances. Medford's ordinances is explicit about it in two different places. One place it says it may issue use variances, and in another place it says it may not issue use variances. So it contradicts itself. There was a debate at one point whether the one that says not was a typo, a Scribner's error. Some people believe it is, some people believe it's not. The current ZBA, all use variances have to be approved unanimously because of the numbers on it. There are 3 members, all 3 have to vote in favor. There is a member who refuses to vote in favor of them on principle. That's why that project was denied. And she, in fact, said during the public hearing, I think this is a great project. I'd love to see it in Medford, but we are not legally allowed to give use variances, and therefore I'm voting against it. So it was extraordinarily clear. I thought that the applicant was actually encouraged to take it to the courts by what people said at that meeting. It came up this evening. So this is something that our city council is debating now, is to, with this zoning recodification, do you allow use variances or not? And the reason it's very relevant for us is because if use variances are going to be never allowed, then this issue never comes up again, and it's not such a big deal. But if they are allowed, then we should be cognizant of this and also work to figure out what is a process that doesn't drag a developer through this long process when they may then just get denied out of hand because we don't feel like approving an apartment building at that location.
Right. I mean, use variances should be rarely used, but in communities where the zoning is outdated, then, you know, they get used more often.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully we could fix the zoning. We'll try.
So there was also reference to the consultant was going to look into the historic ordinance and demo delay to see how that relates to the permitting process, which I think would be good to understand more. I was wondering whether there needs to be any kind of cross-reference to the city's solar ordinance in our zoning, and also whether there, you know, are there opportunities to encourage energy efficiency or you know, green building standards in the zoning ordinance, or whether that's, you know, just a design guideline thing. So those were a couple questions that I had, and particularly just, I think the most important one though is what I brought up earlier, which is what's the recommended process for lining all of these permits up with the different boards. I don't really know what best practice is. I don't know if, David, you have any ideas or.
I don't have any special insight on it, Andre.
Okay.
So there are communities that incentivize energy efficiency and stuff like that, clean energy, by offering a density bonus for including those things. The MAPC has been working on model examples. They've been working with some of our very local communities, because I couldn't tell you right now which communities, but it's from the Metro Mayors group, which makes it really in here, Dan, close to us, and therefore like us. You know, something that applies out in Concord may really not be appropriate in Medford. But, you know, you're looking at Somerville, Malden, Everett, this is really rational for us to be considering. So I don't know where they stand with that, but we could certainly, it won't be hard in the next few months to get recommendations, suggestions about how one can incentivize green building standards within Massachusetts law. And just, I sometimes am not sure what I know because of my background versus what is more generally known. In Massachusetts, building code is at the state level, and we cannot change the building code at the local level. That is different from other states in the country. So in many places, there are recommendations, oh, you could just adopt a more strict building code. We're not allowed to do that. The stretch code was that. We adopted it, but the building code has actually caught up to the stretch code. So what we adopted in 2010 is the stretch building code is actually now the building code and may have in fact gone more conservative, more environmentally conservative, right? More energy efficient than what was on them. So the way it's done in Massachusetts is rather than building code and regulating it, is offering carrots to be more. And the other thing that I've been told is expedited permitting. I, having worked in the middle of our permitting, have not been able to make any recommendations about how to expedite our permitting. And until this summer, I had been told by developers that we actually have one of the fastest permitting offices. And now I don't know if that included things like if it goes to the CD board or zoning, but our building department was very fast about issuing building permits. There was no way to speed it up. Not when something was taking 2 days, 3 days, get it signed off at the counter. When it goes through our longer process, though, I'm not sure how something that's coming through this board or the ZBA could realistically speed things up. Maybe some, but not a lot. So the others to offer density bonuses. And is that politically viable in Medford?
Are there other issues? We only have about 15 minutes, so I'm wondering if there are other issues that you members would like to learn more about or ask questions of the consultant. I think we'd have to maybe do it through the city council since they're the client, but and perhaps we don't do it in terms of a formal letter, but just direct the community development staff to inquire about certain things. That might be the easiest thing.
I would recommend that I'm going to be sending a note to Mark Bobrowski anyhow with some of our files that we attach sort of here's what we're thinking to that rather than trying to go through the city council.
Okay. Well, to what extent can we, massage the language of a letter after this meeting? I think we have to identify what the letter will say here.
Yeah, I've been taking some notes. If you want to continue sort of throwing some ideas out there, then I could draft something and it could be subject to Andre's review and approval.
Yes, David.
I think that sounds good. Are we, at least as a board, very supportive of the modernization of zoning? It just seems like the city hasn't done much of any of this for 40-something years, and it's long overdue. I don't know if we have some of the questions that have already been raised, and I'm sure Annie already has on her list. That's really great. We could pass along. But I imagine we also want to have an opportunity to weigh in when Mark comes back with more specific, with his recodification or his proposed recodification. Mm-hmm. And then I wonder too, Annie, I think it suggested looking at the actual application, the special permit application and the steps and that sort of stuff, like trying to make that look more like something from this decade. And then we have the rules and regs and procedures. I don't know, maybe we want to hustle those together so we're sort of getting them done while Mark's getting done his draft, or do we want to wait for that draft to be done and respond to it? That's one question I have.
Well, maybe what I would recommend is is authorizing Annie to put together a draft set of rules and regulations for the Community Development Board based on some of the research, looking at some of the other communities and then circulating that to us for discussion at our next meeting. Does that make sense? Is that a quick enough timeline, you think, David, or are you thinking even faster?
No, I think so. I'm
That
just
sounds
feeling
like we
bad
could do
because I
it
know
fast.
Annie has a lot of things to do.
Annie's
So I want to
gonna
be helpful to her.
Well, if there is a board member that
Job
wants
security.
to look at the different rules and regulations for a few different towns and then, put a template together, obviously that would be great too.
I'm happy to volunteer to do that.
Oh, great. Okay.
Does that work, Annie?
That sounds wonderful. I'm happy
Okay.
to work with you if you'd like.
Okay, great.
It can be a group effort,
Thank you,
Okay.
team
David.
effort.
The other thing that I feel like we should consider is in in his memo that he gave to the board today, there was actual site plan contents talking about what the applicant should submit.
Right.
And it's not, I have to tell you that I don't know how much it's in line or not in line with what we have because I haven't done a comparison. But it feels like we ought to, and to see if there's here's an easy fix. If there's something that we normally ask for and it's not in his list, and we said to him sort of out of band, we'd like this is in our list, we'd like it to be in the list that you have in the thing there. And it was, it doesn't mention bike racks and we want bike racks, right? Then he would just put it in, right? He would just slip it in there. If it was like, we don't like your list, take it out completely, he's like, that's a substantial change, I can't do it. But if we want it tweaked, I think that he would be very open to that.
Well, I think that's a question we should raise in our correspondence to him is just what, to what extent does he recommend design guidelines to be incorporated into the zoning? Because I think generally my impression is that it should be separate. You don't want to have to change the zoning every time you change a design guideline.
And that's, I think, different from what sort of I was suggesting, but that's a question that we can ask him as well.
Right. Yeah, I'm curious about what he would recommend on that.
Okay. I'm just, in case you guys don't know, Dennis McDougall, who just joined us, I had invited him to join, is the staff to the ZBA. So he also works here in our office. Thought this could be some good synergy and overlap.
Yeah. Well, if
You want me to ask him about, should we consider incorporating design guidelines into the ordinance, or should we do it some other way?
right. Yes. So, and there were a few areas on the memo itself that Bobrowski prepared where he was asking for guidance to go one way or the other. And in my opinion, I think that, where he said pick one or both, generally I think my take on it was picked both, we should do both because it seemed to provide the greatest clarity and flexibility. I generally agreed with everything that he was proposing. I didn't hear anything that I felt I had real concerns with. There was, I think, one area we might want to look at more closely is the criteria. Where is that? Let's see.
Are you referring to page 7 of his document? 10.4.2 by his numbering.
Yes, 10.4.2, right, around special permits. So he's suggesting a new set of criteria for special permits and how to basically evaluate proposals subject to special permits. So it would be modernizing that. And this set of criteria that he uses in communities when he was writing zoning are, let's see, the determination shall include consideration of each of the following: A, social, economic, or community needs which are served by the proposal; B, traffic flow and safety, including parking and loading; C, adequacy of utilities and other public services; D, neighborhood character and social structures, E, impacts on the natural environment, and F, potential fiscal impact, including impact on city services, tax base, and employment. You know, it's different than what we currently have around special permits. I know we're not like the special permit granting authority, so we may not want to weigh in on that, but we do weigh in on projects that are requesting special permits.
Andre, were there particular ones? I mean, did you think that it conflicted with something in your mind or was troubling to you? I think he was presenting these as, hey, these are categories that seem to have stood up to litigation and challenge, and they're probably getting to the gist of what everyone wants to evaluate anyway.
Yeah. Well, what he was, I guess where I flagged it is because he then connected it to the fees and said that often, you know, the board, the special permit granting authority, can, you know, adopt administrative fees and technical review fees for applications. So oftentimes, I think he even gave an example. He said, you know, so these A through F, these criteria, oftentimes a municipality will hire a consultant to look and do a study on each one of these criteria for really major projects. So, you know, that's something we really haven't talked about as a board, because we, for site plan review, can also do that. We can have, you know, we can request fees for studies, third-party studies, that, you know, we can then use to evaluate projects.
So one concern that has been raised is that the phrasing neighborhood character, social structures,
Right.
Can be very well-meaning, but is also has been used historically to abet discrimination. And in fact, apparently the word neighborhood character has been identified as code for racial discrimination. Now, I wouldn't know that if somebody didn't bring that to me and tell me that. It's not obvious to me. And I think that there is a lot to be said for, well, how is it used? But at the same time, it may behoove us to question this and to really think it through. Like, what is it that you actually, because you do want, you know, there are things, right? You don't want a gambling parlor in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And you know, maybe you don't want a Target plopped in the middle of a residential neighborhood, but that's not allowed by your zoning. If your zoning allows, you know, businesses, if Walmart wanted to come in where Target was, as much as I hate Walmart, can I discriminate against them? You know, if they were owned by a Black company, like, would this give us the ability to discriminate? I just want us to be cognizant of it and aware. I don't have a recommendation. Wish I did.
Right. But that was one of the things that did kind of raise a red flag with me when I saw that. I was a little surprised just to see that there, because it seems like a term that's a little out of date.
Alicia, I'm glad you raised that, because I think words matter, right? Language matters, intent matters. You know, it matters. And if the language is really outdated and has intent, even if it's not obvious to the reader, I'm really, really glad you raised that. And I think that would be something important for this board to discuss.
Yeah, and I think in our letter, we should kind of point out that concern and ask him why he uses it.
I missed the context of who said what. I'm sorry.
So in the memo from Mark Bobrowski, the zoning consultant to the city council, he listed a set of criteria, and one of the criteria says, for evaluating special permits, says neighborhood character. And, you know, that term is kind of a red flag, so.
I don't know. I'm more red flagged by "and social structures." Like, that just rubs me wrong.
I don't even know what that means, really.
I think that's the one that I'm hung up on, is social structures, because that's like targeting a specific economic
Yeah.
state of a
It's not-
neighborhood.
It's not just race. There's so many things that when you say neighborhood character and social structures, we're talking. We don't want new families in. We want all rich people that live in Medford. That's pretty much, and especially maybe I can just be a little bit more sensitive to it right now because I'm studying intensely to pass my exam in a couple of weeks. So I'm revisiting all of the historic redlining and the history of zoning being racist and things like that. And the fact that that term is even in something current today, I had not known this, but these are terms that were used to keep communities a certain way. So I'm very glad that you raised it because it would have went over my head.
And I think if in his explanation, what he said was that neighborhood character is more around, aesthetics. Does something fit in? And then social structures is more about like the community, the relationships in that community. And I just think there's both of that makes sense, but you could have better terms for both of those things.
Yeah, and I get neighborhood character can also it doesn't have to be implicitly like to keep certain things out, like the home, what is it, the HOAs of America, they pretty much have neighborhood character. That's what they exist for, right? To make sure that all the houses look alike, that you're not going to have a pink house among all these nice white row houses and things like that when you own. So I get it, but it questions the intent behind it. And if we're questioning the intent behind it, I can only assume that others would.
Right. Like if it said like building style, is that what is meant when neighborhood character is said in a well-meaning way, right? Like in a positive way. Is that what they mean, right? Like the building style, the architectural style? Because you could see if you had a historic neighborhood or if you had a whole modern neighborhood and suddenly you were putting in a building that was very different architecturally, you'd at least want to do that intentionally and have the ability to say, we don't really think that architectural style fits. I don't get it myself. I'm not an architect, but let me tell you, my son does when we drive around town. He's like, that one doesn't fit.
So
Clay says architect. What do you think, Clay? He's like, I'm not touching this right now.
I don't think there's enough minutes in this day.
and speaking of which, it is 8:30. So, and I we did want to keep this to an hour, so I want to respect that. I think we are. Annie, do we need to have a formal motion on sending the letter? Or can we do that informally?
A motion is probably a good thing.
Well, before we do that, then, anybody who hasn't spoken, are there issues or questions you want to raise for around the zoning that we haven't talked about? And just so you know, at the next, I think there's 4 sessions that this consultant has with the city council. This, I believe, was the second one. The next one, he said he was going to come with his proposal for reformatting the use table of the city and cleaning that up. So again, these are really good meetings. Annie, if you could just kind of let us know when they're happening so that board members can participate. Strongly encourage all of you to follow along with them because I think they're really helpful.
Yeah, they scheduled the next one for the 18th.
Right.
Which will be immediately followed by an energy and environment symposium on unusual uses of solar, trees in Medford, and clean energy transportation from 7 to 9 that night.
Wow.
This is symposium's long scheduled. They don't check the city calendar when they schedule their own meetings.
Thank
They
you.
don't care what anybody else is. Sorry.
Well, just forward the info for both of those to the members. That would be great.
And are we still meeting 2 weeks from today? Is that our next meeting?
Annie, do you see anything coming up for that meeting?
I think something in mid-November would be better because that will give enough time
Okay.
for some of the Macklin Road review by the city engineer and recommendation back to our board. So
Okay.
I think probably.
And we can also, yeah, I
Tuesday.
don't, assuming there's not some new projects coming up either, I think we should set aside an hour of time for the design guideline discussion. I know we were going to start that. We didn't do that tonight. So gives everybody a little bit more time to maybe look at some of the material that Jackie sent out or do some of their own research. If you see anything interesting, please circulate it. And then we can, maybe Annie, we can work on structuring that discussion a little bit more, or putting a kind of a straw proposal in front of people that they can respond to.
Right. I just want to call to your attention that there are no Wednesday nights in November that are good to meet, because the next council one is the 18th. And while you're welcome to meet after it, I actually really do have to be at the Energy and Environment Symposium because I staff that. The week after that is a Veterans Day holiday. The week before is the day after Election Day. We've been trying not to schedule things for that day.
Well, what about,
The last one
what
is-
about Thursday the 12th, which is the day after Veterans Day?
Me.
The only thing that is on the calendar is that the Community Preservation Committee public presentations are supposed to be that evening.
Yeah, I can't do that. I would like to be at that.
Can we do Tuesday the 10th, is that the day before Veterans Day?
I will tell you that week that the Housing Production Plan is going to have a webinar on November 9th, Monday.
Right.
So actually, sorry, I didn't even, glad we looked at the calendar. We are going to circulate to you all the draft recommendations before that. That'll be a good presentation to the public of their draft recommendations. And that time window before, after is when we'd really like to get any substantial changes back. By the time the Housing Production Plan is presented to this board, we're hoping that people will have seen the early drafts and will have weighed in, and it'll be more, I don't want to call it a rubber stamp, but this board needs to approve it. So I'm hoping that if people have concerns and questions that we can get them addressed beforehand. And November 9th is the public meeting where we're going to present that information. So that's the window where we're really looking for your feedback. Just because if you may not want to have meetings every single night in a week. Although Wednesday's a holiday, give the day off. Hopefully.
Right. So, Annie, in terms of a day, any recommendations for mid-November?
We could do it a little earlier and do the Thursday the 5th.
There's also CPC public presentations that night. There's Thursday the 19th or Thursday the 17th.
Thursday the 19th looks fine.
It's fine for me.
I would love anything after the 16th, not for selfish reasons. I'm waiting for everyone else. I'll be on edge before that.
That's fine. Throw it out there, Jackie.
All right. Well, the 19th, that just the 18th is the next city council zoning meeting, and then the symposium that Alicia was talking about. So the 19th we can do. Just.
And I guess I'm gonna just flag that is a month from now, and so we'll try and circulate materials before that, like significantly around rules and regulation changes, stuff like that. And we'll plan to meet even if there's nothing on the no cases so that we can move forward. Some of these, Ally reminded us that she's also been tasked with doing some research on linkage fees, which were supposed to be reviewed every 3 years and haven't been changed since they were implemented in the early 90s. But our rules and regulations are from 1974, so.
City government's hard.
I love that they're dated December 17th, 1974.
Is there anyone on the committee who is really interested in design guidelines and would like to do some work in the next month on putting a straw proposal together. If not, that's fine. We'll, Annie and I will do the best we can. But
one thing I did want to flag for you guys is, are we talking about a separate design review process or looping it in to a planning board process through the site plan review? And
my
that may
opinion is
be a
just,
question for an attorney
Yeah.
as well about what we can do. But
I mean, I think it's just part of the site plan review process. I don't.
because I do believe that would require some changes to the zoning to build out what our standards for site plan approval are. But that could be a question that we bring up to Attorney Bobrovsky and
Yeah.
our comment.
Let's do that. Let's include that. I mean, would there be any reason for us to have a design review process that's not part of a site plan review process?
Only that most of the ones I've been able to find are separate. I don't know exactly why that is or what the advantage is. Some of the materials Jackie sent were saying also that things should be design guidelines should be based in the comprehensive plan goals so that they're defensible. So I think this may be something that comes out of that planning process. But it's
So
certainly
you-
something that I'm happy to look into more.
So are you saying, Annie, do you think as a result of that, we should just kind of go slow and wait for, do what we're doing, which has been more of an informal process?
I think it'd be good to get some feedback from the city solicitor or Attorney Bobrovsky about sort of what our options are. But I think that it would certainly be helpful to determine what we might want out of the comprehensive planning process. But I think maybe just from what I've read so far, it seemed like there was sort of a need to have some backup for why we're enforcing these design guidelines. I don't know if any of you are more familiar with other communities where you've worked with design guidelines.
I am not, but
Usually
I'm,
the design guidelines come from zoning or some master plan. But the only other thing I was thinking, like in the interim, is that you develop guidance for proponents of what to come prepared with at the presentations to our board to make it easier for everybody. I mean, that's sort of where we're always having.
We ask the same
Right.
question so people can
Yeah.
have it.
Oh,
Again, we can give out a checklist of saying, you can expect questions on these things.
Like,
Well, and I also get a lot of calls
yeah.
from developers in advance of submitting. And I think like an FAQ document might be a good thing to do anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm used to the city of Boston as very complex, and they have built into their zoning, there's specific articles of zoning dedicated to each neighborhood. And within that neighborhood zoning, it has very specific design guidelines to be compatible with that neighborhood. I mean, that's very complex, but unless you really want to get into an overhaul like that in the city of Medford and look at different areas and neighborhoods and talk about, neighborhood context and compatibility, that's a lot of work.
no, not only it's a lot of work, but not only will it have implications later for inadvertently or maybe purposely segregate in communities when you have neighborhood character compiled into different pockets of one community. It doesn't read well or play out well. But I thank Annie for bringing that up. I ran to get my notes because I haven't memorized it, but I do know that a lot of the American planning literature out there have always coupled design review guidelines with comprehensive planning. I don't know what that looks like at the local level myself because I don't work with, this is the first comprehensive plan that I've ever even touched, which I haven't even touched. I haven't even provided help or feedback or anything when Alicia has asked for it, but I'm just guessing that it has to do with the city's master plan and the city's overall vision so that everything is holistically come together.
Well, I think that we have a good kind of discussion that can be part of a letter that, you know, Annie and I can massage. Annie, do you want to just hit any of the notes that you took to make sure we're not missing anything?
Sure. So what I have here is information on what the recommended process would be for lining all of our different development review items up. The best opportunity for the Community Development Board to weigh in or participate in this process. Some more information that he mentioned he was going to look into on demolition delay and the historic process and how that fits in with his proposed changes. Any opportunities for cross-reference to the city's solar ordinance, opportunities to encourage energy efficiency and green building standards in the zoning ordinance. To what extent does he recommend design guidelines or a design review process? Should this be incorporated into the ordinance or should we do it some other way? And the wording of neighborhood character and, what was it, social structures. Some concerns about that and why he uses that.
Sorry, you mentioned design, like how to handle design guidelines, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do we miss anything, anybody? Or you want to add anything? All right, why don't we entertain a motion to send a letter with our feedback to, well, I don't want to cross the city council is the only thing. Why don't we send maybe the letter to Alicia?
Board would, right, if you send it to me, because theoretically this board is appointed by the mayor and would go to the mayor to the council.
Mm-hmm. So why don't we direct the letter to the director of community development and to ask for her and her staff to get feedback on these questions we've raised.
That's
I'll make that motion, Andre.
Great, thank you, Katie. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Christy. I will do a roll call vote now. Yes, no, or abstain. Deanna Peabody,
Yes.
Christy Dowd,
Yes.
Claes Andreasen,
Yes.
David Blumberg,
Yes.
Katie McHugh,
Yes.
and Jackie Furtado.
Yes.
I'm also a yes. All right. Thanks, everybody. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Motion.
All right. Thank you, Jackie. Is there a second? Les, thank you. A roll call. Deanna Peabody,
Yes.
Christy Dowd,
Yes.
Claes Andreasen,
Yes.
David Blumberg,
Yes.
Katie McHugh,
Yes.
Jackie Furtado.
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Great. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate we did go over a little bit, but not too much. So.
Good job, Andre.
I'll take
Wasn't
15
11.
minutes every day.
All right. We'll see you mid-November. Did we agree on that November 18th or 19th? 19th?
19th.
All right. We'll aim for that. Great. Thanks, everyone.